Now that we've looked at Descartes' rationalist argument, we'll look at John Locke, who is an empiricist. And empiricist means that all or some of our knowledge is derived from sense experience. And it's not an epistemological view that is opposed to reason. We do reflect on the ideas gathered from sense experience, and we make reasonable arguments and inferences based on them. But the idea of the empiricist is that the building blocks of knowledge is experience. So this is directly opposed to Descartes' rationalism, which gets its foundation in a rejection of ideas gathered from the senses. So John Locke starts out by examining ideas. Okay, he says he says every man being conscious to himself that he thinks, and that which his mind is applied about whilst thinking being the ideas that are there. It is past doubt that men have in their minds several ideas, such as those experienced by the words whiteness, hardness, sweetness, thinking, motion, man, elephant, army, drunkenness, and others. It is in the first place then to be inquired how he comes by them. Okay, so this is an examination of ideas. And when we look at ideas, we always think of them as part of an intentional state. We have intentions or intentional states, and we have ideas. So, I believe that, X. I think that. I doubt that, etc. I know that. I perceive that. Okay, those all refer to intentional states, and what these blanks are, those are the ideas. Whatever you fill in there is an idea. So John Locke starts by considering, where do these ideas come from? Okay, and he comes up with the idea that the mind is a blank piece of paper or a blank slate. And I'll read from John Locke here. Let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished? Whence has all the materials of reason and knowledge? To this I answer in one word, from experience. Okay, so these ideas, which could be something like elephant, I think that the elephant exists, or whatever. Those ideas are gathered from experience. Our mind comes blank, and then we start sensing things, seeing and hearing and tasting and touching and so on, and our mind gets filled in. And then we get the materials of reason. Okay, reason is sort of already there. We have the capacity to think about those ideas and make inferences about them. So reason is sort of already there, but the mind is blank and gets filled in with experience. Now, this already goes against the rationalist arguments, which hold that people come into the world with innate ideas. And Plato was one of these rationalists who thought that the forms were known to someone before they were born. And then through the process of being born, we forget them. And that's why when you come to know something, it's really an act of remembering. And I think we can all relate to that. It sounds maybe a little bit out there, but have you ever, sat in a class and then the teacher said something that you had never thought of, and it felt kind of like you had always known that, and it just became was just brought up to consciousness. That would involve innate ideas. Descartes also believed that we come into the world with innate ideas. And as we saw working through his argument, one of those innate ideas that was planted into our brain and was not created by ourself or from our experience in the world is the idea of an infinite God. For those who believe in an infinite God or can conceive of an infinite God, Descartes argues that that could not have come from experiencing finite things. It had to have been, in the brain, wired into us prior to having any experience. But John Locke takes a position against this idea of innate ideas, arguing that ideas are given to us via the senses. It's sort of a passive receiving of sense data and then the forming of ideas. Okay. Now, when there are two kinds of ideas that we have. Two kinds of ideas. One, ideas of sensation. And this, of course, involves all that sense data. So the idea, this would include things like, white, if we're describing this board, there's some silver lining around it. And also, it's hard. It feels hard to me. So hardness would be another one. Okay. But then we reflect on those ideas. Our thinking goes beyond those ideas to learn some sort of abstract concepts that underlie all material objects. And this would be a reference to ideas of reflection. So a good example of an idea of reflection is when we reflect on hardness, and we see that there's hardness in the whiteboard, and there's hardness in this table, and there's some hardness in my body and in this pen and so on. We recognize through that there's this underlying solidity that underlies material objects. So an idea of reflection is solidity. And that is understood by reflecting on sense data, but is not given by the senses in an immediate way, the way that ideas of sensation are. And I'll give you an example. Locke uses the example of a grain of wheat. Okay, and here's a quote: "Take a grain of wheat, divide it into two parts. Each part still has solidity, extension, figure, and mobility." Okay, solidity and extension. Okay, these are all, and he listed some others. These are ideas of reflection. So each part of the divided grain maintains these attributes. Okay, divided again, and it retains still the same qualities. And so divided on till the parts become insensible. They must retain still each of them all those qualities. For division, which is all that a mill or pestle or any other body does upon another in reducing it to sensible parts, can never take away either solidity, extension, figure, or mobility from any body, but only make two or more distinct separate masses of matter. So these ideas of reflection underlie material objects. But as I said, they aren't given immediately to the senses, because in this thought experiment, we've divided up a piece of wheat so many times that we can't even see it anymore. You need a microscope to inspect it. And you could imagine it being divided to the point where even a microscope couldn't detect it. And yet, so long as there are pieces of matter, we would say that they all maintain solidity, extension, figure, mobility. Okay, so those are ideas that we start with the senses. They give us the building blocks. Okay, we start with the hardness of a thing, but then our mind reflects on them, and we come to know more about the world and things that we encounter. So ideas of reflection are different from ideas of sensation. But importantly, we only know about these more abstract underlying qualities of material objects by reflecting on what is given to the senses. Okay. Okay. I wanted to also just talk about different kinds of ideas. We have simple ideas. Okay. And those would be um, simple ideas would be atomic, okay, unmixed, okay, and immediately experienced. Okay. What I mean by atomic is like if we take water, H2O, the simple elements of water, is H by itself, and O, oxygen by itself. In the same way, when I look at this whiteboard, the simple ideas would be white, silver, hard, okay, all by themselves. But then we also have complex ideas, and those are molecular, and they're mixed, okay? And, thinking about water, the complex, water would be, it's given to us as H2O, together. The same with the whiteboard. The idea of the whiteboard is a complex idea. But according to the empiricists, according to John Locke, when you reflect on a complex idea like a whiteboard, you can always extract from it all its simple components. So the whiteboard is, the color white and the color silver and hard and the perceived shape of it and everything put together. Okay, so that would be a complex idea. And if the sensations are the building blocks of all knowledge, then we should be able to take our complex ideas and trace them back to their most simple sensed components, because this is what we can know, and we build all of our knowledge by reflecting on these kind of basic elements of sense experience.